In the last section, we were just talking about biological vectors, or insects that play a role in the life cycle of a certain infectious disease. However, there are also mechanical vectors. Mechanical vectors are like passive carriers of humans that just carry the microbe on the surface of the body. Examples of these are flies and cockroaches, things that you might think if they're walking on your food you'd be disgusted. That's because while they're not infected themselves and do not play a role in the life cycle of the microbial pathogen itself, they carry the microbe on the surface of their legs or bodies and transmit diseases that way. Your book then gets into the different types of portals of entry that a microbe may use to invade the body. There are many different portals of entry, the first of which, as we talked about, could be for the digestive system, by mouth, including food and water. Alternatively, the respiratory system can take in infectious diseases by mouth or nose by inhaling droplets or coughing or sneezing. The skin could also be a portal of entry, especially if there's an insect bite or an open wound that allows the microbe to bypass the skin as a defense mechanism and enter the body. Tattoo needles or syringes are other great ways that microbes can bypass the skin defense mechanism and get into the bloodstream. Then there's entry through genitalia, which would occur through sexual activity. And finally, a portal of entry into the fetus through the placental barrier. As I mentioned earlier, microbes are often adapted for a specific portal of entry. However, in other instances, the ways in which a microbe can enter the body can cause changes in the virulence and progression of infection of a certain infectious disease. A classic case is anthrax, where anthrax is normally naturally acquired through contact with the skin. This is called cutaneous anthrax and is not nearly as deadly. In fact, it almost never causes death as compared to gastrointestinal anthrax, which occurs as a result of ingestion or eating the anthrax spores, or inhalation anthrax, in which case the organism enters the body through the respiratory system. In gastrointestinal anthrax, these versions of the disease are almost always fatal. And inhalation anthrax has also a very high mortality rate. We saw this as well earlier with the bubonic plague. Bubonic plague is acquired through flea bites. Pneumonic plague, on the other hand, which has a much higher mortality rate, is acquired by inhalation of the microbe. And septicemic plague is acquired by getting the microbe into the bloodstream through an open cut or mucous membrane contact. And this is the most deadly form of the disease. One area in which epidemiology is extremely important is in better understanding the source and spread of diseases in hospitals. Hospitals are areas where people go to get better from infectious disease and other sorts of diseases. However, it's not uncommon for people to acquire an infection while in the hospital. These hospital-acquired infections, otherwise known as nosocomial infections, can include things like catheter-associated urinary tract infections, central line-associated bloodstream infections, surgical site infections, and ventilator-associated pneumonia. There are many diseases that are currently known to spread in hospitals much more commonly than in the general population. This includes MRSA, or methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus, VRE, or vancomycin-resistant Enterococcus, and Clostridium difficile, which is a type of bacterium that can cause deadly diarrhea in hospital infections. The reason why hospital infections are of such concern is that many people that are already in the hospital are suffering from other ailments, and if they get sick with some more common infectious diseases, these can prove deadly in these already weak patients. It's also not uncommon for patients to acquire opportunistic infections. Opportunistic pathogens generally don't cause disease in individuals, but if the individual is sick or has a compromised immune system, can get someone sick or even kill them. To better understand and control these various infectious diseases, hospitals are required to have what's referred to as an infection control officer, an infectious control nurse. These individuals have been trained in epidemiology and know how to identify the source and spread of diseases within a hospital. Simple hand washing procedures or wearing gloves is sometimes all that's required to stop some of these infectious diseases. Your book then goes into additional foci of various epidemiologists in the CDC and also around the world. I encourage you to read these sections, but we're not going to go over them in lecture. That's it. I hope you enjoyed Chapter 11.